Crime Curious is a true crime podcast that takes an in-depth look into real cases through the lens of a trained investigator and former prosecutor turned judge.
If you are sensitive to expletives, anatomical descriptions, and accurate descriptions of crime scenes, this podcast may not be suitable for you.
Welcome to Crime Curious. I'm Charnell.
I'm Megan.
And we have our Gree. Welcome back, Megan.
Thank you.
You were gone last week.
God.
We are always flinging dicks around here. I'm sorry. I know. I've got to get a new bag for these raccoon bones.
Okay.
Sorry about that. How many times do we have to throw a raccoon?
Throw a phallus?
Right, before we realize. You know what?
Every time.
Next time you come to record, I'm going to have all of our Gree in like a cute basket.
Okay. We'll just shake the whole basket?
Yeah. We're just going to.
Perfect.
We have thrown phallics around too much on this podcast.
Perfect.
I'm also shaking Jason's keychain.
Oh,
That's
he does.
Really not his, but it is now.
It's just a keychain, too.
I know. Are you ready for a horrific murder that I'm bringing you today?
Yes, I am. Please bring me horrible, horrible murder.
Why do you only come to see me to talk murder?
I had this conversation with a friend last night. We were talking about murder cases, and I said, let's get together and talk about, she said, we're meeting for lunch and or dinner, and we're going to talk about like flowers and like bridal stuff. And I'm like, but it's more fun if we talk about margaritas and murder. And she goes, see, this is why I love you.
Right. Actually, drinking margaritas
and talking about murder.
Okay.
And then maybe a little bit of wedding stuff.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, what I'm bringing you today is the brutal murder of Kathy and Philip Ranzo that took place in Modesto, California in 1979 by 4 teenage crime partners. You are going to find this case.
Crime partners?
Crime partners. That is how I actually saw them referred to in newspapers of the time very frequently, but I liked it, so I adopted it as my own as well, because they truly were crime partners. But you will enjoy the legal aspect to this. Before I get started, though, I'm going to preface with, although the court hearings for all 4 of these crime partners have taken place, there is still family out there actively participating in parole hearings and things like that. And they're very upset about the way that the laws in California have been changed and how that has affected their life. So we
victims or survivors' families or the defendants' families?
We
don't care about the defendants.
We do
usually.
Not. We don't. No, not the defendants' families.
Okay.
The victim's family.
Fair enough.
Rightfully so. Because when you hear about this, it is pretty shocking. And I was really surprised. I've never heard this on another podcast. And maybe I just don't, listen to the same podcasts as everybody else. But I was really surprised that there's not a whole ton of podcasts out there that I could find anyway about this. Because sometimes I do try to make sure that it's not too heavily recently covered,
I do it all the time.
Yeah, but before we get to the beautiful souls that were brutally murdered in this case, I want to name the perpetrators because since there's 4 of them, I just want to make it less confusing if we just name them right off the bat, okay? So we have Darren Lee. He was 16 at the time of the murders and still one of the most problematic, actually. He was the youngest of the group. There was Ronald Anderson, Marty Spears, who also went by Marty Jackson. So you may see him, if you were to look this up on your own, referred as Jackson. They're talking about Marty Spears. Marty Spears Jackson. And Jeffrey Maria. The 3 of them were 17. One had just recently turned 18, but I saw it mixed up several times, so I can't confidently tell you which one had actually recently turned 18. And I couldn't find the court transcripts on every one of these boys' court hearings to see their date of birth.
Are they all legal adults in the state of California?
Well, after what they do, they were charged that way.
Yeah. And yep. So we'll get to that and what's called waiver cases or automatic waiver cases. Okay. I'm ready.
So let me tell you about Philip Ranzo. He was a 30-year-old pharmacist and married to Kathrine, a 29-year-old beauty shop owner.
Oh, I like him already.
So Kathrine actually grew up in Turlock. She was the daughter of a Turlock police officer, Joseph Moore. She graduated from Turlock High School in 1967. And Philip grew up in, I think it's Ceres, C-E-R-E-S, Ceres?
Probably Ceres or Ceres.
It could be Ceres. Like, sorry, this is really messed up when I put it into Google Translate.
Oh, God.
It said Ceres. Okay.
Yes.
But then I hit the button again and it said Carez. So that was zero help.
I have heard Google Translate pronounce your name. So with that being
I know.
Yes, we apologize in advance if it's Carez or Ceres. We're saying pick one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I hear a lot or I read in these podcast Facebook groups where people are just throwing shade at podcasters for not taking the time to research and pronounce someplace correctly. You guys, not everyone can know all the pronunciations of every town in the world. It just is unfeasible.
And believe it or not, they don't always list an appropriate or phonetic pronunciation of them as well.
No.
So here we are.
Professional news anchors don't get it right sometimes too, because it just is what it is. Come to Michigan and try to pronounce a majority of our.
Yeah, come to Michigan and be the weatherman.
Right.
I mean, you're going to be in trouble all the time.
Mm-hmm. But anyway, so my apologies if I'm offending anyone with that. But Kathrine and Philip, who I will probably just refer to as Phil from here on out.
You should.
In my notes, I saw him referred to as Phil all the time.
Because Phil and Kathrine is like, they're like your next door neighbors.
They are such a wholesome American couple.
They have potlucks and you hang out with them at street parties.
Yes, and everyone knows Phil and Kathrine, right? Like, oh, the Ranzos. They're a beautiful couple.
That's right. Phil filled my tetracycline prescription, and Kathrine did my hair.
She did, yes. She makes me look beautiful.
I love them.
Oh, such a power couple. Well, they met at a party that was in Turlock, while in high school, from what I could tell.
Wholesome street parties.
They got married soon after high school, and then they had son Mark. Phil was 20, Kathy was 19 when they had Mark. And at the time of this case, Mark was only 10 years old when his parents were horrifically murdered.
This is awful.
Just kind of setting the scene here a little bit.
Oh, you did.
And just so you guys know, they do have a very active Facebook page as well. That will be linked in the show notes that you guys can.
Great. Is this an advocacy group?
It is.
Family is on there keeping track of things. And
yes.
Do they ask for like signatures or support?
They do when parole hearings come up.
Great.
Yep. So Phil and Kathy, they lived in a nice home in a nice neighborhood. They're just a normal couple raising a son. But before I get to Phil and Kathy's brutal murder, I'm going to start with what the police believe was the test run crime for this pack of donkey dicks.
Wait, so we have our victims here, but there was a test run crime?
There was. And no one was murdered, thankfully, but there's still a very large crime that took place that the police, in hindsight, after Phil and Kathy's murder, think this was their test run.
They took it on a practice run.
Yes.
Murder.
They did.
So this shows premeditation.
Sure does.
Just pointing the obvious out for anybody in case there's appeals and such out there.
Thank you,
You're getting
Your
my
Honor.
unbiased opinion before I know all the facts.
Yeah, absolutely. So we first start this case on June 24th, 1979, when a man named Leonard Luna was taking care of his home of the home of Bernard Marks, who he was actually employed by. So he was house sitting.
Sure.
He was described a lot of times as being the caretaker, so I don't know if he actually was caretaking for the whole summer. If this Bernard Marks was a wealthy man and had multiple properties, I'm not sure. But either way, the homeowner is Bernard Marks, and he wasn't home, but Leonard Luna was. And this was located at 3307 West Stir Road, Newman, California. Between 11:30 p.m. and midnight on June 24th, two young men came to the door and asked Leonard if he could sell them some gasoline because their car was empty. Well, the two left after Leonard Luna provided them with some gasoline, but then they returned 15 minutes later and asked if they could use the telephone.
I just gave you gas. Go away.
I know, but this is 1979.
No, everybody's nice to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Hippies.
As they appeared to be leaving, one of the men turned around with a pistol in his hand and told Leonard to hit the floor and close his eyes. So Leonard Luna complied and then heard a car drive up in front of the house and some more people enter the house. But he's on the floor. He can't see, who these people are. And he doesn't know exactly how many. I can only imagine how terrifying that had to have been for him.
Yeah.
Then, while lying on the ground with his head down, he is hit on the head with the hard end, the blunt end of the gun.
Oh,
all right.
okay.
What am I trying to say? The handle.
He got pistol whipped.
He did. He got pistol whipped with the gun. And then he was taken into the den of the home where he was placed on a couch and hog-tied. That little detail is important. His hands were tied behind his back and also tied to his feet, in case you don't know what hog-tied is.
Yeah, you guys, they put the rope around your ankles and tie them, and around your wrists, which are behind you, and then they attach the two.
They do. Yep. So
which is very uncomfortable to do when you're not tied up, let alone to be forced in that position for an extreme amount of time.
Yep. So Marty Jackson, also known as Marty Spears, said that he wanted to blast Leonard because Leonard had seen his face. Now, we know that it was Marty Jackson Spears because later Leonard is able to identify him and a boy named Daniel Geisler.
Oh, I didn't hear his name in the 4.
You didn't, because
he didn't make it past the test run?
He didn't. He did not make it. He was not a part of the
homicide.
The tragic events that happened later. And I do point that out. But that's why I'm saying that there are crime partners, is because this really is a pack of donkey dicks that all live together and just go around thieving. Their whole intention here is just to target places that they think will have valuable jewelry, goods, and cash.
Electronics, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So later, just so you know, we know it was Marty Spears who was there saying he wanted to kill Leonard because Leonard saw his face. Leonard saw them take a large safe on wheels, several guns, a switchblade knife, and 2 watches. You know, they ransacked the home, right? And later, all of those things were identified as missing and stolen. Now, that was June 24th. Now, I'm going to take you to the evening of June 25th, 1979, where Kathrine and Philip Ranzo, they had dinner at their home with their 10-year-old son, Mark, Philip's parents, Sam and Marie Ranzo, Mark's friend, Michelle Herman, and 2 of Mark's cousins, Mike and Michelle Narzano. My apologies, Narzano. They're all, so their son Mark has a little 10-year-old friend over, and 2 of Mark's cousins, plus that's Mark and Michelle. They're just having a family dinner.
I love it.
Together.
Because it's so normal.
It is. And later in the evening, the 4 children and the grandparents go back to the grandparents' home that was about a block away and just around the corner from the Ranzo's home, right? And they were going to spend the night with the grandparents. Everyone's coming over to Grandma and Papi's.
I love it. Because it's just
house.
So normal. They had a family event, and then Grandma and Grandpa were like, hey, we'll take the kids and you guys can enjoy your night. Or
the kids are
maybe
on
have
summer
some
break.
Adult beverages.
Yeah.
Some people don't do that around their children.
Right.
I love this.
Yes. So they get a night to themselves. The kids are on summer break. They're just going to spend the night with Grandma and Grandpa. When the kids go back to Grandma and Grandpa's house, later, in hindsight, they recalled in substance, as it was described. So this means they had noticed it a lot. The children had seen, and Grandma and Grandpa had seen, an old blue vehicle with a pickup type of body. So it seemed like a pickup truck drive by very slowly several times. There were 4 young male passengers, 3 in the front and 1 in the actual pickup portion in the back.
I think this is important because you are going to notice a truck full of possibly rowdy teenagers or teenagers that aren't supposed to be in your subdivision continuously driving by in a truck. Because
slowly.
In the late 70s, early 80s, come on, you're going to think these guys are up to no good.
Mm-hmm.
What are they out doing?
Yeah, no, I agree. And remember, they only lived a block away from Phil and Kathy. The truck kind of stood out too because it was older, but it also had a whole bunch of boxes and trash and like an actual trash can in the back of the truck.
Oh, yeah, that's noticeable too.
With this person riding with the junk.
I don't know.
Essentially.
Teenagers are dumb.
Right? They first saw this vehicle around 9:45 p.m. They actually told their grandmother, Marie, about it. And so she started taking note and she observed it stopping and backing up at the end of their subdivision. And it was last seen by Marie and her husband around 11:15 p.m. Then all of a sudden, they see it and it's going super fast. So why from 9:45 to 11 or so, it had been just driving really slowly, casually, nonchalantly through the subdivision. Now all of a sudden, it is hightailing it at 11:15 past the house.
Yeah, it's hinky.
Absolutely. Good word.
Oh,
nice.
it's a
nice
word.
placement.
I stole it.
What we know now, this is what we know has happened, okay? Arriving around 9:45 p.m., each boy, I have found it both ways. Either each boy was carrying a firearm or only one was carrying a firearm. Because, we see this a lot in cases where afterwards when they're interviewed, they want to minimize their own involvement. Always. And they want to throw others under the bus. We know that someone had, if it wasn't all of them, that at least one of them had a firearm. Okay? They also had rope.
There's always a weak link.
There sure
Somebody's
is.
Gonna be the talker every time.
Yep. We also know that before these 4 had planned to pick a house that they believed was going to be full of cash and jewelry and goods, okay? And we know that they had discussed this time killing the Ranzos instead of just leaving them able to identify like they did the night before with Leonard Luna.
Was Leonard Luna ever discovered?
Yes, he's a survivor and he is able to identify.
I figured that, but like that same night, like, do we know how long he laid hogtied in that house?
It was pretty quickly.
Okay, good. I was like, are they driving around 24 hours later and Leonard Luna is still hogtied?
I could not find an actual date that he got himself free and was able to.
But he was able to report this and presumably gave a description at least of one of our douchebags.
Yeah. Well, we will get to how they connect these crimes. We know that they discussed killing the Ranzos before leaving Ronald Anderson. Ronald Anderson was described as being the lookout. So Ronald later tells the police that, as they were driving around, they were discussing killing them. And they pulled up and he never went inside, he says. He stayed as the lookout. And the code was if someone was coming, Ronald was to honk several times or drive really fast, as like to get their attention. Marty Spears and Darren Lee knocked on the front door. Mr. Ranzo answers. They told Mr. Ranzo that they had run out of gas and asked to use his phone, while Jeffrey Maria hid in nearby bushes on the property. So Phil Ranzo offers them gas that's in his garage because he's a good Samaritan, and their phone actually was out of order at the time, so they couldn't have used the phone even if they wanted to.
Do you remember back in the days when phones were attached to your wall and they had a cord and you had to dial them with your finger? For those of you that think I'm being dirty or weird, I'm not. It was rotary dial.
You had to finger your phone in order to make a call.
And sometimes they legit, the phone company, say you went through Michigan Bell Telephone, for example, which was a company, your phones would be down.
Yeah.
Or busy signal every time you tried to call it.
I actually think
taking us back.
I think that dial was probably invented by a woman. And,
A lonely woman.
So, right. And I'm just going to say that some skills have declined since now the push button phone. That's all I'm going to throw out there. I don't know.
Fair enough.
I'd have to interview some women from the 70s.
I don't know
and 80s.
if that actually correlates, but it'd be an interesting scientific study.
It really would. But anyway, so his phone doesn't work. So Mr. Philip Ranzo is like, guys, come to my garage because I have gas and I'm happy to share with you.
Because he's a nice freaking guy.
Absolutely. So they follow him to his garage. Marty Spears and Darren Lee then pull out their guns and threaten to kill him, forcing him to the floor, where Marty Spears hog ties his legs and his hands and then, ties his hands and feet together. So he is hog-tied.
Familiar.
Exactly.
He's got an MO.
Yep. At this point in time, Jeffrey Maria, who had been hiding in the bushes, joins them in the garage, and he beats Mr. Ranzo 6 times in the head, trigger alert, with his son's baseball bat.
Oh, shit.
The baseball bat that had actually just been used that very afternoon between Phil and Mark, his son.
So they used his own child's baseball bat to bludgeon him.
Correct. At some point in time during the assault, someone, and remember, we don't know specifics, guys, because you can't trust anything that these men are saying, and they try to lie and minimize their involvement. But someone actually started stabbing Phil in his eyelids and neck. So Darren Lee, Marty Spears, and Jeffrey Maria then went inside the home where they found Kathy watching TV in the living room.
Oh.
They forced her at gunpoint into the upstairs. They forced her at gunpoint into the upstairs bedroom where she was tied up and trigger alert. And then she was raped by Marty Spears Jackson.
Well, did he plan that, or was that just a bonus? He happened to run across a female victim.
That's just it. Is this his first time? I don't know. We don't have that information. Seems a little odd that all of a sudden it would just escalate.
That sexual assault happens just like the first time ever during a planned homicide robbery.
Yeah.
I don't buy it.
No, me neither. So when her body is later found, there were signs that she had been struck multiple times in the head with an axe that they likely got from the garage. And she suffered fatal stab wounds to her throat, as well as multiple cuts to her eyelids and face, just like Phil, but with the axe instead of the switchblade. Horrific. Absolutely horrific.
I'm gonna let you tell the story before I give any more of my opinions.
So June 26th, 1979 is when the bodies of Phil and Kathrine Ranzo were found at their residence at 1404 Fernview Drive in Modesto. How they were found is why, shall I say, the next day, because this was June 25th, is that they had actually failed to appear at work. Okay. So James Blomquist was actually Philip's boss at the pharmacy, and Carolyn Schaefer was an employee at the beauty salon that was owned by Kathrine. And they didn't show up to work. That was not like them at all. They were both concerned, and they both end up going to the Ranzo residence. Okay. Carolyn Schaefer actually called the police because of her concerns before going to the Ranzo residence. Like something didn't feel right to her. And my understanding is that they went and did a quick welfare check and then was just like, yeah, no one's home. But James Blomquist, he tried to enter the house, found the door locked, looked in the garage, and actually saw Philip's body lying on the floor.
Okay.
So then he calls the police. They arrive about 5 minutes later. An officer, Hamilton, is the first to respond. He actually had been the one who responded earlier to Carolyn's call.
Really?
Yes, but for whatever reason, maybe he didn't look through the garage window, or if he did, he just missed that he wasn't looking as closely as James. I don't know.
It
was
happens.
just missed. Yep. Obviously, Mr. Blomquist there shows Officer Hamilton Philip's body, and they realize they've got to gain entry into this house. So when they go up to the third floor is where the bathroom was, that they find the nude body of Kathrine Ranzo lying on the floor.
Horribly mutilated.
Yes.
Her with an axe.
Her with an axe. The baseball bat is bad enough, and the stabbing with the switchblade in the eyeballs and all of that. But then you bring in an axe. I don't know. That's an extra level of demented.
So thank you, because I legit was going to say it's an added level of depravity. Mm-hmm. And it just goes, if she was not dead when that occurred, if it wasn't mutilation, which is its own issue, then there's some level of wanting to cause such significant pain and trauma to somebody. But your supposed intent was to rob?
I know. I agree. It doesn't make sense.
Someone or multiple of this group of the four horsemen, the asses, four asses, whatever we want to call them, is severely unhinged. And all of the others that are with that person, if there's only one that's committing this mutilation, are equally culpable because they chose to be a part of this crime spree, a conspiracy. Everything that they planned to have happen there, if other bad shit happens as a result, you have an obligation to remove yourself from it.
Right.
Or you're just as guilty as the person that did the mutilation.
Yes.
Just so people know. Don't conspire with people to commit a crime and think that you're less guilty because you didn't pull the trigger.
Absolutely.
You are.
And in my opinion, the same person who did the blunt force trauma is not the same person who did the stabbing and throat stabbing and all of that stuff. I
don't think so either.
I truly think that this was a group effort. And you might hear on other podcasts where they look at court documents and say confidently, this is the person who stabbed, this is the person who did that. I'm refusing to do that in my notes because I know people. And I know how they will manipulate and lie and try to deflect from their own accountability. And quite frankly, we don't know. We know Marty Spears is the one who raped Kathrine. We know that.
Well, you can get DNA.
Right. We know that Ronald was the lookout. There's a lot of evidence about that and a lot of confirmation about that. But we're going to get to the question of Ronald is really, he knew what was going on. He did not call for help.
I knew it was going to come down to it.
And
I was only the lookout.
Yep. And he claims that he never saw the scene, but we get to contradictory evidence in a minute.
Does it remind you a little bit of the Shanda Sher case?
Yes.
When all of those girls, mean girls, committed murder. It turned into finger pointing and like basically trying to decide the least culpable. And in all reality, a judge did make a decision regarding culpability and people got some different lengths of times.
Yes. Yes.
Now, if you told me that 3 people positively identified one person while they were being interviewed separately as doing this, this, and this, and all of their stories were consistent, then I might feel like we knew the actual factual basis about what happened.
And that's why I'm saying with Ronald, I think we can say he was the lookout.
So that was
But
confirmed.
he still didn't. Yeah, we'll get to more problematic things about him.
He may not have anticipated all of the mutilation and rape that came along with the robbery and murder that he was involved in, but sometimes you get what you get.
Well, yes. And then he finds out more and still doesn't call. Right? So, I mean, there is still
this thing's unraveling and he's watching it happen instead of getting out of Dodge. Run.
Right. Call the police.
You got yourself involved in a robbery and it turned into a murder, a rape, and a mutilation. You should be running and calling the cops and saying, I made it. I fucked up.
This is not what I signed on for.
I'm so sorry. I know I'm going to jail. I was going to rob this house with my friends and they're there murdering someone. Yes, you have that option, people.
You sure do. To not be wrapped into the murder and rape.
Yeah.
So the cause of death for each was actually determined to be bleeding from the stab wounds and severing of arteries in the throat.
Yeah, that means they were originally alive when those things happened.
Which is, to me, a horrible detail that the family has to live with. And this is why the family is so upset about what things that happen later that we'll get to. But I want everyone to remember that these are people that people loved, right? And remember those horrific details because they were alive. They did feel those things. Their life was not taken quickly and in mercy. It was painful and drug out. They had to bleed to death. So no, like you said, it's a level of depravity that
it
is beyond just murdering.
Their 10-year-old child who's a survivor is
I didn't
out
mean just
there.
murdering, but beyond killing someone.
But he's out there someplace now as an adult, hearing these things, knowing these things, and being able to, having known and loved his parents, put himself in their position.
Yeah.
And so, it makes sense.
It does. And I do have some on Mark later. But anyway, what happens, Megan, the rope that is used to tie the Ranzos was identical to that used to tie Leonard Luna in the night before's Newman home robbery.
Never fall for that Home Depot rope special.
Right? Stop trying to save a penny, people.
That's right.
When you're going to commit crimes.
If you're going to commit a murder, get different rope for each one.
So Dr. Erno Hazy from the Stanislaus County Pathology Department, he actually determined that the wounds that were sustained by Kathrine Ranzo were different than those sustained by Phil. And they were able to determine that his wounds were caused by the switchblade knife that had been taken from the Newman home the night before.
Oh.
Yes.
So when we have another connector
here. We do.
And that victim, survivor, can positively identify at least one of these douchebags.
And that's how they end up bringing them into a lineup for Leonard Luna to identify, because they connected not only the switchblade injuries, but the rope
and
as
the hog tying.
The hog tying, the similarities there. Well, and even the hitting, because Leonard was hit with the blunt end of the pistol. He was pistol whipped, but then it just escalated at the Ranzos. Officer Hamilton actually arrived at the Ranzo residence at about 2:15 on June 26th, and about 4 p.m. is when Dr. Erno Hazy arrived. And in his opinion, the time of death for each victim was about 16 hours prior to his examination. So he's figuring sometime between 11 p.m. on June 25th and 1 a.m. on June 26th, which, remember, the grandparents remember that blue truck speeding past at 11:15 p.m. that they had seen creeping around since 9:45. The office area in the master bedroom of the Ranzo residence had been ransacked, with drawers pulled out, money, checks, papers, jewelry. All of that was on the floor. A lot of it was missing as well. Some money, a Browning automatic shotgun, 2 pendants, one which had diamonds in it, were found missing they had to have Sam Ranzo, Philip's father, go through the house and try to identify what might be missing.
Yeah.
And he remembered from pictures and from, just from memory of the type of jewelry that his daughter-in-law had. And while investigating, the police talked to the neighbors, of course, and they pieced together that one neighbor had actually seen an older model blue El Camino Chevrolet cruising at low speed in front of his house that was located at 1416 Fernview Drive on the afternoon. So there's the right next door neighbors.
Well, and now that you were describing the body type of this vehicle, now you say it's an El Camino, and that makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. And so on the afternoon of June 25th is when they saw this El Camino driving by between 3 and 5 p.m. Remember, the grandparents and the grandchildren saw it about 9:45. Now, his attention was attracted to it because in his quote, it sounded like, quote, an inboard motorboat, end quote. And he thought that it had a blown muffler. Yeah. So in other words, it was drawing attention to itself because it was loud as hell.
Yeah, these dumb shits. Mm-hmm. They are cruising around, casing the place, being completely obvious in an easily identifiable El Camino with a bad exhaust.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, fellas.
I know. At this point in time, when the neighbor saw him between 3 and 5 p.m. on the 25th, there were just 2 young men in it. And actually, the neighbors said it really did kind of look like they were like looking around the houses.
I mean, hindsight, right?
There was another neighbor who was walking his dog on June 25th that night, he lives right across the street from the Ranzos. And he said that he saw Philip Ranzo working on one of his autos in the garage between 11:30 and 10:30 and 11 is when he was giving his dog his last walk, and he saw Philip at that point in time. So again, we're still going in with the coroners, the coroner saying they were murdered sometime between 11 and 1. The grandparents saying we saw that El Camino drive by at 11:15 at high speeds. It's still completely coinciding.
It does.
With that time of death. The neighbor went to bed and then was awakened around what he thinks is like 11:30, midnight, to the sound of screeching tires. He got up, he looked out the window, and he saw what looked like a 1959 bluish-green El Camino pickup driving at a fast speed, faster than normal, by his house, and it had a noisy muffler. There were 2 people in the vehicle that he could see. Now, the problem with committing murder with 4 people is that now 4 people have to keep their mouths shut and their stories straight, and these idiots do not. First of all, several of them gave Kathy's jewelry to their girlfriends.
Of course they did.
Which, according to the family-run Facebook page, one of the girlfriends had the audacity to wear one of those pieces of jewelry to the trial.
Oh, no, she didn't.
Yeah. So imagine being the family.
Why wouldn't they have executed a search warrant and seized that, other than or charged her?
Right.
With receiving and concealing stolen property.
Mm-hmm. I am not
Again,
sure.
Hindsight and my vindictiveness, but I'm a former prosecutor, and oh hell no.
Right. No, that is such an insult. And I don't know. Remember, it was Sam Ranzo who had to initially identify what might be missing from the home. So what I had even speculated about is it possible?
It may not have been listed in the original missing, and then the family went, holy shit, that is my mom's necklace.
Correct. That's what I'm wondering. I don't know those details, but I could see how that could very easily have happened, right? So anyway, these boys are literally excited about the crimes, and they talk about them, which leads to their downfall, all right? And as other people become involved and are interviewed, then they fall apart, right? Like I couldn't find the dates of their arrest. This did happen in 1979. I tried to listen to another podcast about it, but it wasn't like fantastic. It was hard for me to follow. It wasn't fantastic. And so
I wonder if people ever think that about us.
I don't, probably. I would have loved to use them.
They're really hard to follow.
They are, and they keep shaking.
The Megan person uses big words, and the Charnell person pronounces all the names wrong.
Yes, it's horrible. It's not professional at all.
2 thumbs down. Move on.
They are arrested fairly quickly. I'm sorry, I don't know the actual date.
You
it
don't
really ticked me off. I don't think
anybody's shocked based off of just the complete lack of knowledge in terms of how one should commit a crime if one was going to. That this didn't take long to solve.
No.
I mean, you could have just in the 70s been watching the Magnum PI and the Cagney and Lacey and solved this thing pretty quick from your couch.
I think so.
Not to say that the police didn't do a fantastic job. Good job, law enforcement. I didn't mean make it sound like it was that easy, but these guys are obviously novices, self-centered, narcissist. This is exactly where these 4 young men are.
Well, and just sloppy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just absolutely sloppy with the way that you went and bought rope. It was pretty easy to tie all that together, too. No pun intended. But, it wasn't too difficult.
The lack of after plan here is also just showing that they're novices. Not the rape part though. You still can't convince me that's the first time that guy sexually assaulted someone. He's got a trail of ex-girlfriends a mile long that you probably will find that he's sexually assaulted. Yep. Guarantee you.
I agree. 17 years old.
100%. Yeah, all kinds of back in the 70s when peer pressure and yes means no and no means yes kind of thing probably was going on. Those poor young ladies. Yep. Or men, whoever. I don't know. No judgment. Other than for sexual assault. I judge that.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Me too. Heavily. You actually get paid to do.
I do
to
usually.
Judge that, but, But anyway, I just judge it for free on the side.
I like it. As do all of you.
Yep. So Leonard Luna was able to identify Ronald Anderson, and the neighbors were able to identify the vehicle of the boys after they were, arrested. They were able to identify that vehicle. Ronald Anderson, Marty Jackson Spears, Darren Lee, and Jeffrey Maria, all living together, and they targeted the Ranzo's home because they believed large amounts of cash were kept within.
Why?
I don't know why. I don't know what led them to believe that. Do they think that pharmacists have a lot of cash?
Ooh.
Do they think that beauty shop owners have a lot of cash?
Just business owners.
Yeah.
It would have made more sense if they would have broken into the pharmacy to try to rob it. There's some street value on drugs, but maybe they thought that pharmacists brought, narcotics home with them.
Oh, very possible. Right, that they could then sell. Sure. So during a search of the home, plenty of evidence is found from both the Leonard Luna robbery and also the Ranzo, family robbery. All 4 of them go to a lengthy trial, and all 4 are convicted of murder and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Okay.
But then the state of California changes its law to include that life sentences to teenage offenders is considered cruel and unusual punishment.
That is not just California.
It's not.
It was a Supreme Court ruling.
Now, Darren Lee was 16. The other 3 were 17. And as I had indicated, I believe that one person had just turned 18, but I found different names for who that was. So I don't know. They're all around that same age anyway. And at that time, when California law changed, all of their sentences were changed to 2 consecutive life sentences of 25 years to life with the possibility of parole.
Yes.
But you would think 2 25-year to life sentences.
But were they being served consecutively or concurrent? And I bet they're concurrent.
They are concurrent.
They usually have to be in that situation.
Yep. And so what this means, due to the law change, is over the last couple of decades, the family has had to attend over 60 parole hearings in an attempt to keep their family's murderers behind bars. And these murderers continue to try and minimize their involvement and not take accountability.
Well, then they're not likely to get parole. The whole point, oh gosh, you guys cannot like this. And I know that there are victims and survivors.
Yes.
And I'm not saying I like this either, but I understand the science behind it. Okay. There were a lot of studies done to indicate that individuals, even if they were charged with as adults and faced an adult sentence, which could include things up to the death penalty at different points in time, depending on your state, or if it was the federal government, right, that certainly still has the death penalty and charges. They did make a determination because, as having a advanced degree in child development, that the human brain, especially the male brain, doesn't really stop growing until 26, and I think in some arenas 50. But we're not going to give them that.
Not
much
everyone
leeway.
Fits into textbooks. Yep.
It's literally the reason that there's a number of acts there that young adults who commit mistakes, this isn't a mistake. I'm talking about, say there was just a burglary or a home invasion where there was no murder, okay?
Yes,
no life offense. We have, for example, in Michigan, something called HIDA, which is the Home's Youthful Training Act, where somebody accepts responsibility. They accept responsibility and the judge can sentence them. And it's up to a certain age that we can just do it. Like, I think it's 22, maybe. It changed recently. As a judge, I should know this, but I don't. It might be 23. And then they extended it recently so that from ages 23 to 26, you may also be eligible for the Youthful Training Act if the prosecutor agrees or consents.
Oh, okay.
So certainly not applicable in a case like this where there was murder and they were convicted of life offenses. But you have to consider the fact that these youth had not fully developed and clearly had some issues, and have to consider, is there the possibility that any of them is there redeemable?
Rehabilitatable.
Thank you. Are they? Why would I want to say redeemable? Rehabilitatable. It's been a long Wednesday. And I don't know that they are, which is why I think that while the law changed and the family is probably livid about the law change,
absolutely,
the likelihood of getting this reversed is slim to none. This really isn't what people should be spending their time on, because there's just science behind not engaging in the cruel and unusual punishment of a life offense with no possibility of parole for a 17-year-old. I'm sorry. They're just, because there are going to be times when it's appropriate to allow this person a second chance.
Right.
In these cases, though, you have to ask, and I guess that's what I'm interested in. Has anybody ever taken accountability and accepted responsibility?
Well, we'll get to it.
Okay, because that's when you're going to have a potential of a release on parole.
Well, we'll get to it. And I know you're going to find this interesting. All right. So, as I mentioned, the family has had to attend several parole board hearings advocating, because there's 4 perpetrators, right? And they come up to for parole like every 2 years or something like that. So it's a lot. It's a full-time job, I would say, for the family, right?
Just emotionally to prepare for it, than to actually testify at it or do the letters or get the supporters. And then either the relief or the trauma from after.
Yes, exactly. So let me tell you, like, for example, Ronald Anderson, who claims that he was only the lookout. He said he didn't participate in any of the murders or have any knowledge of it. Yet in the trial, it came out that Ronald Anderson admitted to Marty Spears' brother after the robbery that they had committed the robbery, okay? Ronald Anderson drove with Marty Spears around the Ranzo's neighborhood in Marty Spears' El Camino multiple times in the hours before the robbery.
So it's Marty Spears' El Camino.
It is.
Right, which is showing premeditation.
Yes.
So yes, you're the lookout, but you case the joint.
Yep. Also in the trial, it comes out that all of them acknowledged that they knew that at least Jeffrey Maria was armed with a pistol in his waistband that night. And they all saw Marty Spears grab the rope from the El Camino as well. According to trial transcripts, Ronald Anderson told police that before leaving for the robbery, he, quote, overheard Marty and the others discussing the possibility of killing the Ranzos, although Ronald Anderson claimed that he was not involved in the discussion, he just overheard it. Well, in that case, I'm going to say, then why didn't you call the police and say, someone's planning a murder tonight to stop it from happening? And that's the argument that the family has as well, right?
Correct. He may not have been involved in the planning phase, but if he was there and he heard it.
Yes, then he knew. He had knowledge of it.
Well, it's like saying there were 4 people in a room. 3 were sitting at a table making decisions, and the 4th person was jerking off in the corner. You're still there.
You're still there. You're still hearing all the decisions that are being made.
Sometimes you literally pay extra for that.
Yeah. God.
It's kind of a ridiculous argument, but why is the argument being made, ladies and gentlemen? Because defense attorneys do their jobs.
Right.
And when you don't have anything else to base a defense off of, having your client be the least culpable one is your best defense.
Right. But this is
My guy was only the lookout. He couldn't have changed anything that happened in that situation. He was just the lookout.
This is what keeps coming up in the parole hearings for Ronald Anderson, right? The jury, though, heard evidence that Ronald Anderson's then girlfriend told investigators that Anderson said his role was to wait outside in the El Camino and, if necessary, signal his friends by driving around and honking if anyone came. Ronald Anderson himself told investigators that he considered himself the watchman. When the other 3 went into the Ranzo's home, he remained with the truck. According to Ronald Anderson, Darrell Lee and Jeffrey Maria returned to the truck about 20 minutes later with a manila envelope, leaving Marty Spears inside the house. This is likely when he was raping. Darren and Jeffrey were all excited when they returned to the car with Ronald Anderson. Then Ronald takes Darren and Jeffrey to a nearby apartment building, and then he returned to the same parking spot because he left Marty Spears at the home with Kathrine at this point in time.
Really?
Mm-hmm. After Ronald Anderson picked Marty Spears up, they went in search for Jeffrey and Darren. They found Jeffrey's brother, David Maria, at Lisa Swenson's house in the early morning hours of June 26, 1979. In trial, Swenson testified that Marty admitted killing 2 people because they had seen him. And remember, Marty was the one who said during the Leonard Luna home invasion, that they should kill him because he saw them.
Yes.
Okay. So.
And people, I'm sorry. Yeah. Leonard would have been able to testify to that as a survivor.
As he did.
That is the person that said he should have killed me. Mm-hmm. Maybe the others didn't let him. Or it wasn't part of the plan?
This is why it was the test run.
Okay.
Yeah. Ronald Anderson then asked David Maria. So this is, remember, David is Jeffrey's brother. Where his brother Jeffrey was, and actually threatened to kill David if he didn't tell him. Ronald, the getaway driver, threatened to kill David Maria if he didn't tell him where his brother was. At this point in time, like I said, they were all talking. They're telling people about this. So this Lisa Swenson knows about it. David Maria, Jeffrey Maria's brother, knows about it. And he's like, if you don't tell me where your brother's at, I'm going to kill you too. Then Marty Spears Jackson's father, testified that at about 3:30 a.m. on June 26th, Ronald Anderson and Marty were back at their home, at his parents' home, Marty Spears' home, and had an envelope full of cash on the kitchen table.
Why were they at the parents' home if they had their own place?
I am not sure why they're there. I don't know
it's
if
like
they're
the two of them
think
set
they're
off
on the run.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. If they thought someone was onto them or maybe going to look for them at their apartment.
And let me throw this out there. Perhaps the places where I found that they lived together was inaccurate. Maybe only a couple of them lived together. Maybe all four of them didn't. It's entirely possible because what I'm reading...
Maybe they all live together at somebody's parents' house.
That's a very big possibility too, like in the basement. I hadn't considered that. You're right. That could very well be because I did find from court transcripts that they lived together. But what I'm reading you right now is actually from an appeal from the Ronald Anderson case. So this is also from the court transcript. So I think maybe we should go, that is probably accurate. All four of them probably lived with Marty Spears' family.
Or at least flopped there.
El Camino.
Okay.
So, yeah, very possible. Anyway, so it's 3:30 a.m. They have this manila envelope filled with cash. They're counting it. This is Ronald, too. They each took their share. Then Marty's mother testified that while they were basically discussing, it was described as generally discussing. They were generally discussing the Ranzos. Ronald Anderson told Marty's mother, quote, "It was a bad scene. It would have made you sick," end quote. So answer me this. If Ronald Anderson was not a part of these murders and was only the lookout, how did he know what the scene looked like? If he truly was the lookout, when he went back to get Marty Spears, he went inside.
Clearly.
Yes.
And I'm not sure if any laws have changed, but at this point in time, he is clearly an accessory after the fact as well at this point. At no time am I seeing or hearing him indicate, oh man, that was more than I was planning on getting into. Hey, mama, I need to go to the cops.
Right.
This was bad.
Nope. Well, and the police, this is what the police problem is with Ronald's stance of being the lookout is there's about 60 minutes that he can't account for. Because he can tell them, I was on the lookout, all three were inside, then two come out, Darren and Jeffrey come out, I take them to an apartment. Now, I didn't say their apartment, just a apartment, okay? He goes back and picks up Marty, but then he's not seen again till 3:30 in the morning. So that's about, from the police timeline, there's about an hour where it is unaccounted for and it is believed that he was in the house observing the work that had been done there, probably taking as much as he could, and in the police's opinion and psychologist's opinion, enjoying the scene that was in front of him.
He's a conspirator, a co-conspirator. He's equally as culpable. There's really no argument against it. You might be able to talk about rehabilitation with the person who's the lookout who didn't engage in the violent behavior, but in terms of their actual level of guilt is identical. There's just too much case law that is intended to include the lookout as being equally as culpable. Otherwise, that's the best job in the world. I mean, come on, have we not all seen a perfect crime movie, a robbery movie where they, music and then they go the brains.
Yeah,
the muscle,
right. Yeah,
the lookout. They're all guilty. They're all part of the conspiracy.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
You can call him what you want, but the lookout's just co-conspirator is what I would call him.
For sure. So sadly, all 4 of these men have been up for parole several times. And I didn't give you a ton of information about the trials because honestly, there was so much evidence against them, you guys. And it was lengthy because there were 4 perpetrators and they were trying to untangle the web of lies of who, like you said, who was most culpable. They all freaking were.
When I used to do juvenile cases, I have one attorney who shall remain nameless who used to refer to those cases as a liar's derby. So you have all the horses and they're getting ready to run off the mark and it's like lie. And then you see which horse gets out farther and it was the liar's derby. And this is a liar's derby, you're referring to.
It absolutely is. As it stands right now, as we record this in August of 2024, Jeffrey Maria has been released on parole in September 2023.
Did he serve almost 50 years?
Well, 40 some. So this was 1979 to 2023. He has a wife of 14 years.
So he got married in prison.
He got married in prison.
Love is love is love.
And from what I can tell, the reason that Jeffrey Maria is out, and I do understand why the family is so angry. They have fought at every parole hearing. I mean, I've said this before, but this is true for the Ranzos as well. If you're ever murdered, this is how you would want your family to defend you time and time again. They are amazing people. The way that they write, the governor, they go. And I will say this too. A lot of times the parole board for all 4 of these men have agreed for their parole, and the governor of California has reversed it. So
wow. So there have been cases where the parole board was planning on granting parole, and then the governor denied. Yep. He overturned their decision. He overturned,
yes.
This is a lot of work at the grassroots level by the family and supporters.
This is what I mean by if you are gonna, you would want your family to take a page out of the Ranzo's book because they have done so much legwork for their loved ones, for Kathy and Phil. And their son Mark is a big piece of this as well. And so anyway, they were unsuccessful. Of course, there was a change in government in California, and the governor would not overturn Jeffrey Maria's parole when he was announced as being released. I think that it was that he was granted parole in August and then he was released September 3rd. So it happened really quickly. Now, his wife of 14 years spoke up and said that Jeffrey has made the most progress in rehabilitating himself. We'll get to the things that he's done.
Yeah, it would have had to have been shown. Yep. This would have come out at a parole hearing and would be public.
It is, yes. And I think that from a legal perspective, Megan, you will agree with, yes, he has shown the most progress in rehabilitation. Does that hurt any less when he's released for the family? Absolutely not. No. Does it make people think he'll never offend again? No.
Right. And so that's the thing to point out, too, is that parole boards have to make a decision. And I don't know that we always, some of it is subjective, right?
Sure.
Taking all of the steps toward rehabilitation, you have to weigh those against the risk to the public safety. Mm-hmm. They have to. So I'm interested to see what some of the rehabilitative steps were.
Well, the family Facebook page, actually, I am directly quoting, not only because I think it's going to show you where the family's at, but it talks about what he's done to, that the parole board, found that he was eligible for parole. And when I read these direct quotes, just please keep in mind the pain and grief that this family has suffered, and you may not agree with everything that they say, but this is their right to do so. So, quote, Mr. Maria took part in the home invasion, robbery, torture, and murder of Philip and Kathy Ranzo on June 25th, 1979. He walked out of their home that night with pockets full of money and jewels. He gave the jewelry to his girlfriend, who proceeded to wear it to the trial. He had every opportunity that night to stop this heinous crime, but he didn't. It took Mr. Maria 44 years to learn how to completely manipulate the parole board and lie his way to freedom.
Wow.
The panel today was made up of 14 commissioners, and they only needed a majority rule to affirm Mr. Maria's granting of parole. The Ranzo family knew going into it today that there was a highly likely chance Mr. Maria would be released. And why would it not be affirmed when the commissioner who granted him parole back in March was sitting on the panel today? Mr. Maria has earned his GED, 3 associate degrees, and 3 trades. He volunteers as a service dog trainer and a palliative care worker in the hospice unit. This is what our tax dollars are paying for. Meanwhile, Mark, remember that is Kathy and Phil's son, was left an orphan at the age of 10 and had a rough life growing up without his parents. He had nothing handed to him for free. Our justice system is bullshit, and Governor Newsom is the biggest chicken shit coward alive. The only thing I can say at this point to Governor Newsom and the parole panel is that I am a true believer in karma, and when Mr. Maria reoffends, I hope you can sleep at night with your decision. End quote. So that's the statement that the family put out.
I have zero commentary or right to.
Yeah.
I think that they had a right to say every single thing that they said there, and I have zero opinion as to that.
1,000,000%. Yep.
I can tell you why I think they granted parole based off of that. But I think based off that letter, these highly intelligent people, they know why too.
Yeah.
They just disagree.
For sure. Well,
I don't think they like the wait part. They very clearly said when he reoffends, so they clearly believe he will.
Yes.
They don't feel like it was weighted correctly.
Yep. Nope. I get that. And I liked their, you've had 44 years to learn how to completely manipulate the parole board and lie your way to freedom. I've heard families say that a lot. I would feel the same way, Megan. Like, yes, you're putting on a show with these service dogs. You're putting on a show with these hospice stuff. This is stuff to keep you occupied.
You know what, though? I don't know if he necessarily put on a show. He was a kid when he went in there. I'm going to throw him this bone.
Yeah.
Here's the biggest injustice in all of this, and they pointed it out, and it is a ridiculous flaw in our criminal justice system. It's not a joke. I may disagree with that statement in terms of how they referred to the justice system.
Oh, right.
But individuals who go to prison, who are in prison for life, have to be treated a certain way and offered some opportunities. Yep. And they are on the taxpayer's dime, okay? So his ability to get his GED and degrees and learn trades and volunteer within the prison, of course.
Yeah.
Those are all things that he has an opportunity to do, not on his dime. A victim of a crime, a child whose parents were taken away, had nothing paid for.
Right.
Now, there are Crime Victims' Rights Act that allow for recompense to some point, but the person would have to be able to pay. Like, I'm sure they were all ordered to pay some type of restitution or a fine when they were given their life sentence.
Sure.
Based off of the maybe $10 a day or a month. I'm sorry, the prisoner, they may be making a prison with a job.
Yeah.
Where is the public funding for victims of crimes like him, one who was left orphaned?
Yep.
To pay for him to go to school to get his associate's degree.
Agreed.
3 of them.
Yes.
So that he can be a productive member of society and his lifetime of therapy paid for. And yes, I know there are Crime Victims' Rights Act, both federally and at state levels, that there is some funding available for. Maybe he didn't take advantage of those, or maybe he did, but it was still nowhere in comparison to what the perpetrators of the crime got.
Yeah, and maybe he didn't know about them either.
Sure. I mean, notice is supposed to be given legally by the prosecuting official in these cases, and they're supposed to be given information to be able to follow up afterward as well. They're also given notice every time somebody is up for parole. As well as part of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. Yes.
But would that have been enacted in 1979?
It may not have been. So and I'm not sure federally. I have an idea, but I'm not going to put myself out there with misinformation. But like in Michigan, the Michigan Crime Victims' Rights Act has been modified many, many times throughout the years. It's still called, I think it's called like the Van Regenmoorder Crime Victims' Rights Act. That was a politician in the state.
Sure.
And I think it came about, maybe like the early 80s or mid 80s. And then it's been added to and modified to since. So you are right. You are accurate. Perhaps there wasn't something in existence at that point in time to offer him services that may exist now. my point in the whole dissertation I just gave you on crime victims' rights is that I understand just the complete hostility and anger toward the government of California and the parole board in California by this family when you're comparing services.
Yeah, absolutely.
And weighing risk. And I don't know that the family was given a really good explanation of why. Yeah, he did all these things, and this is why the risk has been minimized.
Right. I agree. Because
none of us are going to know, Charnell.
Right. Just because he did these things doesn't necessarily mean we have reduced the risk of recidivism, right?
We don't
I
know.
agree with you there.
There had to have been a psychological, legitimately a psychological. Sure. And we have in a lot of these psychs that judges review, parole boards may review at that state felony level. Risk of harm, and it's built right in, and families don't always love it or understand it, but there's like a lie scale in there, and you can test things like manipulation and then see if somebody's actually made progress in terms of their psychosocial.
Right.
And maybe that was done and we're missing all of that.
I'm sure that
I want answers. Like, I don't know.
That it was, but
somebody give these people answers.
I understand where where all of their remarks are coming from. I am sure I would feel very much the same way. And, I saw a lot of comments on Facebook in this group where people are like, well, a life sentence should be a life sentence. And that's not just in this case. There's a lot of cases that are given life sentences and they don't actually serve life sentences. And we really couldn't with the population control in prisons and things like that.
But some people don't understand the original intent on quote unquote life sentences. So remember, there are different countries that a life sentence is 25 years or 26 and 3/4.
Yes, I know. Right.
They put a number on a life sentence. And
it's not actually meant to be literally life. It's a vast majority of your adult life.
And in my state and in many others, when you look at the potential penalty, it actually doesn't just say life. It says life or any term of years. So it gives leeway to the judicial system, if you elect the right people or the right people are appointed to do their jobs, to pick the right amount based off of either sentencing guidelines that are in place or really just taking a person's life experience and figuring out what is the least amount of risk to the public.
And he has served 44 years.
That's a long time.
Right. He was 17.
Yeah.
When the crime was committed.
I can understand this both ways. Yeah, the other 3 individuals remain.
So yes, Ronald Anderson remains in prison.
The lookout.
Yep. Due to his lack of accountability and honesty on his part in the murders.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, he was just the lookout.
Yeah. Now Marty Spears has actually been identified as the mastermind, and he remains in San Quentin. His parole has been...
The rapist also? Wasn't he the rapist as well?
He absolutely was, yep. His parole has been denied, and he has been involved in many fights, some drug-related issues, has not successfully completed any of his drug or offender treatments that they have
40
put
years?
in place. Yeah.
I feel like he's probably in the right place.
Now, Darren Lee he was the youngest at the time. He is also still in San Quentin, citing lack of accountability into the crimes and lack of completing rehabilitation programs. And so that's where, the difference, I think, is for, as you were talking about, for Mr. Maria, is the choices were made. When you're in prison.
He excelled in prison.
You do have choices to either better yourself, to spend your time either trying to learn something new, bettering yourself, or engaging in further criminal activity. And for like Marty Spears, he continues to find drugs in prison, use them, and be involved in gang activity and things like that, right? He's made different choices than Mr. Maria. So
I picture this guy just not even giving a shit that he's up for parole, and he comes in and sits there and like picks his teeth with his nail.
Yeah,
and waits for him to say, "Well, denied."
Yeah,
you've done nothing to show that you could ever be a productive member or safe member of society.
Yep.
So
exactly,
there we are.
Now, as for the couple's son, Mark, his grandparents did raise him. He's 55 now, and he is a leader in the fight for the parole board time and time again.
I want to hug him.
He's pictures of him. He kind of reminds me of Sam Elliott. Like,
ooh, really?
Yes, he has this great...
I'm sorry, we're not trying to flirt with the survivor.
With Mr. Mark.
I wanted to hug him before you said he reminded you of Sam Elliott, because...
There's some great pictures of him.
Can you imagine spending your entire life from your point of view being 10, being an advocate for your parents who were taken from you?
No.
The constant stress.
45 years.
He's a freaking superhero.
Mm-hmm. No, I cannot. He always has one requirement for the parole board.
Oh, am I going to like this? Mm-hmm. Are we going to say it in a Sam Elliott voice and I'm going to picture him twirling the mustache?
If I could lower my voice, first of all, I need to because I sound like a child. But if I could, I would. But he always has this one condition that has to be met before he will accept any of them being granted parole. And this is a direct quote. You can let them out the day that I can leave with my parents. End quote.
Gave me a little bit of the goosebumps.
Right? That's a good, what better, there is nothing better he could say from his position.
He's like Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride.
Yes.
My name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father, prepare to die.
Yeah.
And then when he finally finds the six-fingered man and he says, what can I do? I'll do anything. And he goes, I want my father back.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, you can get out when I can leave here with my parents.
Yeah.
That is my condition.
Okay.
It's perfect.
I mean, they're not going to consider that a reasonable request,
No,
sweetie, but we are with you.
We are.
You have two big fans right here.
Absolutely. And I don't think that, how poetic, because I don't think I could have put that powerful of a statement in words like that.
One, I would have, and I do this for a living, but I would have been incredibly sarcastic. I probably would have quoted Inigo Montoya to
That's true.
the parole board, and then they wouldn't take me seriously at all. That's exactly where I am.
Yes.
I'm looking for the six-fingered man.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
So Mark grew up many a night sleeping on the floor out of fear and having night terrors. Despite his grandparents' best efforts to raise him and help him, he said that he did get into a lot of fights and he had it really rough. Since then, he has learned, since growing older and not being in those teenage years and in teenage brain, he has since learned that fighting with others will not heal his pain. He has 2 adult daughters and a wife, all of whom take part in not only keeping the memory of Philip and Kathy Ranzo's spirit and life alive, but also keeping the violent, dangerous men who took them behind bars.
He raised a whole family of advocates.
He did. He really, really did. He has a beautiful family.
You raised good people, Mark.
Yep, sure did. Despite the pain that you went through. And I do like that he acknowledged, in my teenage years, because I had such a traumatic event happen in my childhood.
He didn't end up in jail himself, and maybe he did, and we're not mentioning it. I don't know.
No,
but
I don't know.
You would expect somebody who went through that to have such trauma that they probably would have made terrible decisions as a youth or even as a young adult.
Yeah. No, but he even acknowledges I had it rough from the trauma and stuff too, but I didn't murder people because of it, right? I was angry and I was angry at other people, but I didn't murder, and
murder, maim, sexually assault,
like Marty Spears. In his defense, he tried to, I believe it was Marty Spears. He tried to cite his bad childhood for why he was a rapist and a murderer.
It might be true.
Sure,
but just because you had a bad childhood, just because you had a traumatic childhood and bad things happened to you, never justifies your crimes.
Does not give you
gives insight as to how you became the person you are. And we have had sympathy before for serial killers, mass murderers, people like this who had really bad, unfortunate, traumatic childhoods. But we have never forgiven their acts as a result of them.
We've always said
and Marty
is not
should
your
keep that in mind.
fault, but it is your responsibility, right? Your trauma, not your fault, but it is your responsibility so that you don't go out and further trauma other people.
And those of us who have trauma, experience trauma, some of us work trauma,
right.
Those of you out there who we know have had super traumatic childhoods and had super adverse childhood experiences, including our friend Mark here. He was able to, couldn't make the trauma better, right? But he recognized it.
Yep.
So there we are with it.
So Megan, before we leave, I did want to say that last week's case that was recorded with Jason.
I'm a fan. It was so good.
The Adam Chase case.
Yeah.
When I was telling, I think I told everybody that a listener, Erin, had recommended it, but not knowing how comfortable she would be with it, I had left out the detail that she knew Adam personally. And so I just wanted, she emailed us and I just wanted to follow up. I wanted to read the email.
Okay.
She said, "Morning, ladies. Yet again, thank you for covering Adam Chase's case and the amazingly hilarious comments that were placed seemingly random throughout the podcast.
They were random.
Well, as always, that's our style.
You're welcome.
While I did miss Megan on the case, I did enjoy Jason's energy.
I missed you too, Erin. And Jason did it justice, though. They did a good job, especially with the name calling and the inappropriately placed humor, which is my favorite.
She said that not only did I describe Adam correctly, but I also described Rose correctly as not being a looker.
Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what I said, something like that. But anyway, she was like, yeah, she was not exactly a looker. And so I wanted to say, thanks again for that case. A lot of people seem to enjoy it. We got a lot of positive feedback, and so sorry for the loss of your friend. So, all right, with that, are you going to give me a brain back?
I have a couple product reviews.
Oh, love them.
I know, me too. And this one just had me giggling because, first of all, even reading the label of this can, it is a sparkling cold brew coffee by a brand called Barissimo. I bet people love this, right? Sparkling cold brew
coffee.
But the flavor is cucumber, lime, ginger flavored, made with raw sugar cane. So
for coffee?
Cold brew coffee that tastes like cucumber, lime, and ginger?
No.
Well,
a Moscow Mule that tastes like that, sure.
Coffee, Charnell. Cold brew.
No.
Ready?
Yeah.
If you want to have a bad day, I have the drink for you. This drink is what you give children for punishment. This is what we used during the Cold War to make Russian spies give up their secrets. This is what the devil pours into people's mouths being punished for gluttony. This is actually what it tastes like to lose hope. My brother told me this drink was horrible, and he's a mute. I watched him eat a lemon afterward. This is what is going to cause me to have cold sweats at night. Drinking this will induce labor, whether you are pregnant or not. Whatever led me to buy this yesterday proves that I am cursed. I love it.
I love that. The descriptors.
Oh, yeah. This is a woman who
that sounds exactly like a beverage that would put you into labor even if you're not
her taste
pregnant.
buds were wronged. So,
yeah.
And then an Amazon review. So this is a product that is meant to be spread on your carpet, for example, if your pet were to have urinated or left a stain, but very specifically like for a cat, for example. Okay. And it's supposed to smell like lavender, or there's a lemon one. Okay. So the product comes, and I just want you to see this product, if you can see.
Oh.
That's just...
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Is that in a plastic
Ziploc baggie? It is in a
baggie?
plastic Ziploc baggie with the product in it, and there's just white powder. Okay?
Okay. This is how it arrived to the customer?
Yes.
Classy.
Powder fail.
Yeah.
Is the title. I don't know what is more disturbing. The fact that it came already in a second package sealed so as to ensure it wasn't flagged as a possible anthrax scare, or the fact that it clearly seems to have been tossed around like a lavender-scented cornhole bag. I am not going to send this back so as not to be flagged by the U.S. government or the United States Postal Service.
Good call.
I will report back as to its effectiveness on my senile spaniel's urinary masterpiece after I get the chance to cut off a corner of it, like an icing bag, and figure out how to apply it to carpeting for vacuuming. My child suggested throwing it at the carpet like a bug bomb, leaving the home until the dust settled, and renting an industrial vacuum. No one inhale. It's sealed on my counter and does have a pleasant odor, like a bag of lavender-scented cartel meth hanging inconspicuously on my counter. I hope no search warrants are executed in the near future. If so, this stands as my demise. Respectfully submitted by crime-curious Megan.
Megan, this happened to you?
Yes, and I am angry. And Amazon is still impending.
They won't approve it?
I feel like I might have upset them with cartel meth.
But
they better publish that. I gave it 1 star. I will report back onto the product effectiveness, but what am I supposed to do with that?
Nothing.
When I opened it, I was incredulous.
I bet.
Someone shoved a product inside of a hermetically sealed Ziploc and then proceeded to beat the shit out of it until it exploded inside of it.
And then was like, this looks good. Let's send it to the customer.
When I picked up the Amazon box outside my door, I could already smell lavender.
Oh,
so
I
I figured this is a strong product.
Yeah.
But then when I opened it up and I went, what the fuck?
Do you know what I think really happened? I think somebody got it in its original packaging, noticed that it was like, you know how sometimes if packages are left outside, the cardboard starts to like melt away? Might have noticed there's a hole in this and returned it. And Amazon or whatever company was working
using Amazon
was like, this is fine. Let's just put it in a Ziploc baggie and resell it.
And send it back to this lawyer who I'm sure will be perfectly fine with it in its present condition.
And going to use it. I love that your daughter suggested just throwing it at the carpet like a bug bomb and leaving the home.
Just throw it. Oh, yeah. I have the seller. I know who you are.
They know who they are, too.
Yeah,
I'm
30 days, which I'm still within for refund or replacement. I'm not sending loose powder in a Ziploc bag back to Amazon.
Good call, Judge Megan.
Thank you.
I don't think you should.
People, if you're listening, send me the thing sealed beautifully in its bag.
Oh, that is a beautiful bag.
I would buy this at the Walmart.
That's not at all what you got.
It is not.
You got the Wish version.
I did. I got Wish Ken. That's what I got in a Barbie world. All right, guys. Well, there we are.
Yes. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope that you keep it curious.
And keep listening, y'all.
Yeah. Till next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.